morning, everyone. Happy New Year. Thank you, May, for organizing this event, and thank you all for coming at 8 a.m. I didn't realize it was such a popular slot. So in this presentation, I think we'll show some analysis we've done which shows, on average, on a national level, how much does it cost for a dairy farmer to transition towards regenerative agriculture. A key message here is that this transition is very nuanced, and as you'll hear from the panelists later on, they explain what these nuances are. But what we try to capture with this analysis is to see, is there a light at the end of the tunnel, considering current state of the economy of dairy farming? Is it possible to become profitable if you transition? And the findings are mixed, but also encouraging at the same time. So first, I want to start with this graph. For those of you working on dairy farming and farming in general, this would be a familiar graph. So this shows how the cost of fertilizers changed since the war in Ukraine until now. And it shows how the instability that farmers are facing every day. So therefore, when we are asking them to transition towards a state where they sequester more carbon and they protect biodiversity, this is the reality in which they operate. And I think this is a key message of why regenerative agriculture can address this challenge. Because if the high input farming creates a state where you have to really you face a lot of uncertainty in cost increase of fertilizers, of other inputs, then this creates a situation where it's very hard to predict where you'll be in a few years. It's very hard to raise money for, and it's very hard to plan for such a farm. So we think regenerative agriculture can provide a potential solution in this space, because if you require less of these inputs, you're more shielded from such price fluctuations. And this is now the analysis from the analysis we did. We broke down the analysis into three types of farms. The first one is partly housed farms, so it's like grazing and housed. Fully housed farms that will transition to partly housed, and then fully grazed farms. And there's two key messages. We don't have too much time to capture them, but please find us later on to ask us questions about this more. But the two key messages I want to highlight. So what the blue bars are showing is the change in revenue that these farms are facing. So as you can see, the revenue goes down quite abruptly. And this is the challenge that farmers are facing when asking to transition. It is because there is now less production that they are able to put forward. There is, especially in the early days, there is a lot of learning by doing, a lot of dropped revenue because they are transitioning into a new system, especially if they're changing the breed of cows, for instance. However, the positive message is that the two lines you're seeing, and this is the second key message, show that this farm is a healthier business at the end of the transition, because it is retaining more cash for every amount of revenue it brings in. And so if, for instance, a farm at the end of the transition was to apply for this loan, for a loan for to raise money, it would look as a healthier business, because not only its EBITDA will be higher, but also its sort of cash flow as a rate. So because the expense as a ratio of the revenue look much better. And this is for partly housed. For fully housed farms transitioning to partly housed, the image is even better. Like, look at the orange line, this which displays the operational income margin. It is much higher at the end of the transition. And now I finish with the last comment, is that this was done using very conservative assumptions. So this was done thinking, in the current state of play, with no extra premium pricing, with the current policy framework in place, what would the transition look like? But also, we don't capture any benefits past year 7, which are likely to accrue, especially if you improve biodiversity there and you can access further markets and further support is available. So I will stop here with a message saying that transition is really hard and farmers require support, but even in the current state of play, there is light at the end of the tunnel, and I think this will be the key message that Maria will bring forward, or how we can collaborate to improve this. So thank you very much, and I'll call Maria.
Good morning, everyone. It really looks like the early bird catches the worm when it comes to such a big room. Thank you, everyone, for coming. And it's really rewarding standing here a year on since we've worked with WWF, and really a lot of the work that has come together in our thinking about how, as a bank, we support our farmers in actually adopting these practices. Now, one of the key things that happened in 2022 was we recognized how vulnerable the farming business model is if it's so dependent on fossil fuel inputs that can be subject to geopolitical shocks, and that it was stunning to see how vulnerable that business model could be in such a quick moment in time. Second, it was also about recognizing both heat waves and floods and how that is actually affecting the productivity of farms, and how that's only going to get worse. So in 2022, recognizing these real stresses that farmers were facing with their business model, we had put out a 1.5 billion relief measures funds just to support farmers through very difficult times. Now, when you think about it, that's not a sustainable business model either for farmers or for banks, for constantly having to access relief measures. Instead, what's a lot more sustainable is thinking about how do you actually reduce your dependence on these inputs, and how do you also make yourself a lot more resilient to a lot of these environmental shocks. And that was critical in our thinking. And when we thought about how do we bring this all together, it was about what does it need to look like? What does the transition look like? And what are the investment profiles that would need to happen? And considering that farmers have to take on the actions, what is the best way that the rest of the food system, including finance, can share the cost and risk of that? And so this is a lot of the work that's come in, which we've worked with WWF in shaping the analysis, thinking about what are the questions we need to answer to really support farmers in that transition. And so these are some of the things that we've thought about in terms of the key learnings that we've had is, one, actually understanding that financial model and then thinking about what are the right types, what are the actions and how do you get that, and this is what we want to learn from you, what is the support you need, especially in that fallow year direct period. Please speak to our relationship managers. It's been wonderful working with NatWest, with the relationship managers, to this entire network that really wants to understand this from our farmers. We have preferential lending towards taking these actions, and so that's another thing that you can speak about. But we really recognize, and we're working a lot more with the food retailers and manufacturers on how we can share the cost and price of that risk. We're really proud of the work we're doing, but what we recognize and what I'm really excited about today is the farmer story. One of the key things that we've come in those conversations is the confidence to take those actions. And these amazing farmers that you'll see who will speak, they provide us with that confidence that this can be a sustainable model. So thank you very much, and I really look forward to hearing from you.
Bueno, and now I invite the panel to please join the stage. Andrew Ruiz, Andrew Brewer, Sophie Gregory, James Robinson, and David Finley. Please come along. Can you see there properly? And thank you, Marianne Vasilis, for that presentation. As we know, and as Vasilis said, we know that every economic model has its assumptions and limitations. And that's why we decided to develop a case study report and 5 documentary films to add that nuance missing to the financial journey shown in the model. Thank you. The films we will be presenting today were produced by Colin Ramsey of Dragonlight Films and Claire Mackenzie from Springtail Production, the team behind 6 Inches of Soil. So if you haven't seen that film, please book it. Claire, raise your hand so they can spot you. Today, what we are doing here is celebrating the remarkable journey of these farmers who have placed nature at the heart of their farming practices. Their path has been far from easy, but their resilience and determination have been truly inspiring. I've had the privilege of visiting each farm, engaging in both structured and informal conversations, and even sharing homemade meals, whether it was breakfast after milking the cows or dinners after a long day of work. These moments allowed us to connect deeply and understand each other's journey. Throughout our discussions, I witnessed the full spectrum of their experiences, from moments of despair to sparks of hope during eureka moments, and the fulfillment that comes after overcoming challenges, one that comes when the farm and the cows feel settled. Their stories are testament of the power of perseverance and the strength found in community. These farmers have faced numerous barriers, but their unwavering determination has enabled them to navigate these obstacles and embrace change. They have shown us that with the right support and shared vision, we can achieve great things together. Our findings show that the main barrier for farmers is not cost per se, but risk. Each farm is unique, and decisions are context-dependent, with farmers carefully evaluating potential changes. While farmers take significant risk to improve their farms, potential unpayable debt or changing policies and inappropriate advice can threaten their business viability and impact their families. We also demonstrate that a dairy farm adopting regenerative practice would typically ensure a farm financial profitability, mostly because of the lower reliance on external inputs, as Vasilis has just said, and increase its resilience, among other things, to intense climate events such as floods and droughts. This should be considered as an investment for the farmer, and our model shows that that should be have a typical repayback period of 4 to 7 years. Support from policymakers, financial services, and the entire supply chain is crucial. Policies must avoid undermining regenerative farming, emphasizing a triple challenge approach to balance nature, food quality, and climate change efforts. We should consider reassessing how we are measuring farming success, considering broader benefits and costs. Relationship managers and advisors need to dig deep and understand the specific needs of those that want to farm with nature, fostering trust and respect through long-term relationships. Lastly, farmers are constantly innovating and seeking improvement. Education should also support nature-friendly practices. Evidence of what works and what doesn't work are crucial, and this would only help overcome stigma, with some still fearing they will be seen as those that ruin their legacy of the farm. To make this a reality, farmers shouldn't carry the financial burden alone. As I said, all actors involved in the agriculture sector must support this change of paradigm, and you are also key in supporting change and helping solve UK's biggest issues. We are now going to present the films and let Farmer's Journey speak for themselves. And after the films, we will have a Q&A question for our panel, so let's just begin. Yeah, go ahead.
We're farming about 420 acres, mainly dairy. Currently there's about 290 British region cows, run on a grass base, a spring calving system. From 2012 to 2017, we sort of ran quite a conventional sort of high nitrogen grazing system, which was profitable and worked well. Things changed. 2018 in particular, we had quite a drought spell, and that sort of showed the weaknesses within the system. So as that sort of sparked then a quest to sort of learn more about regenerative agriculture. The goal is to make the farm more resilient to, I suppose, climatic changes. I definitely see improvements in those fields where we have more diversity. There's definitely more life, whether that's above ground, below ground. We manage our grazing animals with electric fences. We move regularly, up to 4 or 5 times a day at certain points of the season, and then always keeping them off ground they've grazed recently. We want to avoid overgrazing as much as possible because that's what damages our roots. We want our roots to be able to grow deeper. Using these methods to produce milk in a way that mimics nature in the best way possible gives us the resilience financially from being less reliant on external inputs. We're not trying to fight nature, we're trying to work with nature. This in turn hopefully means the farm continues to improve and be there for future generations. It wasn't that our previous system was unprofitable. However, we're now a lot less reliant on external inputs, which seem to have got more volatile in the last few years. We've been up to 350 cows milking, but again, that sort of perhaps showed pushing the system too hard. The farm feels a lot more settled now with less cows on it. Our output probably has reduced, but alongside that, we've reduced input costs, and therefore sort of our margins remain relatively similar. We're making as much for less work. I think the most benefits have sort of come. So with the cows last year, we sort of seen drops in mastitis rates, improvements in fertility rates. Cows seem to be lasting longer. There just seems a lot less stress on the animal, which should reflect to lower replacement rates, which ultimately is margin saved. Mentally and emotionally, I feel a lot better off. They're ultimately sort of healthy soils, healthy cows, healthy produce, healthy people. What I'd say to anybody wanting to try something different on farm is to start small. Have an area on farm to test a new practice, monitor it, make changes as you see fit to your system, and don't be afraid of failure.
So Andrew has come all the way from Pembrokeshire, Wales, where he's undertaking regenerative farming in his Moor farm. In 2022, Andrew was awarded Farm Carbon Toolkit Soil Farmer of the Year Runner-Up Awards, and which recognizes the best farmers and growers who are engaged with and passionate about managing their soil. Sorry. Andrew, your film, you were the first farm we visited. And I just want to share something that I do remember. 2 moments where literally my heart stopped. And the first one was when we saw the cows, the herd, go to graze. Do you remember, Claire? So we were filming from the side, and all of a sudden, you could see just the power and the strength of the herd. And when I looked at you, I could just see how calm and you could evidence the trust bond that you had developed with your cows. So the second moment where my breath was taken away was when Colin decided to sit on the grass just to film the cows, and a bull decided to sniff the camera. And I was just thinking, I hope the WWF safety rules have been completed correctly. But what I realized is that I was witnessing a stress-free environment and a harmonious relationship of you with with the cows and the farms, and it was all developing as an entire unit. So my question to you, Andrew, is what are the key changes that you've introduced and why, and how has that impacted on your profit margins?
Thank you. Good morning, everybody, and thank you, May, and thank you, WWF and NatWest, for placing an invitation to be involved in this project. So yeah, I don't want to repeat what's already been in the video there, but we were already sort of a profitable business, but stresses, or not so stresses, but sort of challenges of climate, and also sort of observations of animal behaviour and sort of what was happening within our sort of farm environment and ecosystem sort of made me challenge perhaps what we were doing, and that's probably opened the door to changes in practices. So I suppose there's been an accumulation of different events over 5 or 6 years, increase in plant biodiversity, reducing reliance on chemical nitrogen, change the way our planned grazing, rearing our heifer calves on nurse cows, and about this last 12, 18 months reducing our sort of milking frequency as well. All have their own individual reasons why I adopted them, but ultimately they're all intertwined as well. So not all have been hugely successful. Some have been some have been very little. I think some still need tweaking, and some perhaps need to be put back on the shelf. For example, for our business, going to once a day milking this year has perhaps been too soon a move for us. Concentrating our production down onto less litres has sort of put too much pressure on our overhead costs. We have debt to pay, so we've got to keep our business head on as well to understand that some things we might want to do, but we got to take time to get there. The cow calf, or rearing our heifer calves on nurse cows, has reduced our direct rearing costs to next to nothing. But again, we got to acknowledge the opportunity cost of that milk possibly being in the tank. But if you're out in the field in the middle of spring, all the cows running around full of life, that's a really hard one to put a value on as well. And then I suppose the biggest bang for buck we've done is changing our fertiliser programme. So we've moved to sort of a foliar nitrogen application system. So in the course of 2 years, we reduced chemical nitrogen use by over 60% and managed to maintain grass production. So in terms of margin on that was huge. But I think as mentioned, the firm, there's no one size fits all, and we've all got to try different things to what suits your own individual context. I won't go back to the way perhaps we farmed 7, 8 years ago, but I will continue to experiment, challenge what we do every day, and wanting to sort of farm or to mimic nature, to farm in a way that we can increase biodiversity and our whole farm ecosystem health, but at the same time remain in what we want to be highly profitable and leave a business for the next generation.
That's amazing. Thank you. Thank you, Andrew. I'm now going to introduce Sophie Gregory before we see her film. So Sophie has an organic farm in the Dorset-Devon border in England, where she and her husband farm 400 spring calving, mainly Irish Friesian cows. Sophie and Tom are first-generation farmers and arrived at a home farm in 2014. Sophie has a background in accounting and won Dairy Woman of the Year at the Women in Dairy Conference, which is an initiative from the Royal Association of British Dairy Farmers. She is also currently undertaking the Nuffield Farming Scholarship, looking at the future of organic farming with a particular focus on dairy.
I'm a dairy farmer on the Dorset-Devon border. We've got about 400 cows. I don't actually ever feel like I'm going to work, and I think that I am so lucky. So until that changes, I can't think of anything else I'd rather do.
We would call our farm probably a mixed farm, but using regenerative principles. We were very lucky to start in a share farming agreement. So we started at 20% and with the goal of buying to 50-50 through the first 10 years of the tenancy. And we actually managed to buy him through cash flow in the first 5 years. And so then we sat at 50%, and we bought him out the other side. The big thing with farming is that you actually have to treat it like a business. Part of the sustainability talk is you have to be sustainable on the bottom line.
We sell our milk to Arla, which is a European cooperative, and we all own part of the business. So that means we get a profit share of the business twice a year as well. We have an organic committee which feed in the struggles we're having on farm into the buying team too, so that they understand when they're going out to sell the milk exactly the true cost of producing organic milk, because that differentiates quite a lot from conventional. We're not reliant on fertiliser, so the pricing of that isn't affecting us. It does mean that we are quite reliant on the climate and a good growing season, so we are reliant on sunlight and the amount of rainfall. We're probably more of a mixed farm now. We've got about 300 acres of arable with the long-term view of growing enough feed that we feed back to the dairy cows instead of buying concentrate. And then we've got another block of land which we use to rear the dairy replacements and also some of the beef. The climate has changed quite a lot since we've been farming. We're getting sort of wetter springs, drier summers. The plants that we're actually growing need to be different and need to be more resilient to that. How have we made our business probably more resilient is growing different species in the ground, made sure we've got the right cow type for the farm. Also, we are doing beef as well as growing some arable, so we're de-risking all the produce that leaves the farm. What we put in front of the cows is also about creating a healthy herd that needs less intervention from us. A healthy plant creates a healthy cow. We have this principle in the farm that if you look after the cow, it will look after you, and it's one of our biggest sayings. So making sure that we always treat the cows with respect and always putting high quality feed in front of them. And then you see that back through how they're impacting the environment, but also how profitable the farm is. My advice would be probably just to try something small and see how you get on with it and monitor it. We don't have to change the whole farm in one step, but little steps add up, whether it's the way you treat your hedges or whether it's the way you grow your maize or whether it's the breed that's right for your farm, but just small changes add up, so have the confidence to give something small a trial.
And I am going to share this. So we were in the farm, we were waiting the cows, and all of a sudden I just hear a snap, like, ah! And I see Sophie running a bull from behind just to put him in his place. And I was like, what? A proper boss in her farm, But the most outstanding thing that you could realize in her farm was the love and the respect that she has for her cows. And I must say that I had never seen a cow that wanted to be petted that much. So it's just so beautiful, Sophie, what you have. So my question to you is, what was different and what was easy from a financial perspective when adopting organic and regenerative practices?
Firstly, I'd like to say thank you to May and the WWF team and to Claire and her filming team. It's been such an honour to be involved, and they really captured part of the soul of the farm, which, it was amazing. But like you said, they're a real herd of individuals, our cows, and we try and treat them that way. Well, this is a bit nerve-wracking. I've got milk buyer in the room and bank manager, so I will try my best. Firstly, I say that when we went organic, actually, it was a financial decision. It wasn't because that's the way we wanted to farm. We looked at budgets for organic and conventional spring and autumn, and actually, it was a financial decision. And I always make that quite clear because that actually, it added up on paper. So we started out as, there's a conversion period, and I'll start with the challenges really, financial challenges. So there's a period of time when becoming organic that you are feeding organic feed, but not receiving the premium. And that's quite a hard point in the business. And actually it came at quite a downturn in the milk market as well. So when we started out, conventional milk price was about 30p. By the time we converted, organic was 30p. So it was quite a storm we went through. It was just part of the milk cycle, but it was just unfortunate for a new business that we were seeing that. Next thing is that the soil takes time to adapt. So yields can drop, and it's being open-minded that it will come back. So I think we did see drops in yields across the farm, but that was changes in, you can't go cold turkey. You have to be open-minded that the soil will recover because it had been reliant on fertilizer and treated in a different way. Selling into a market that we can't control as a farmer can be a challenge. You can do budgets all you want, but then external things like geopolitical things happen that actually aren't in your control. So that can be a challenge. And the same goes for the input costs in terms of feed. We're not growing all our own feed, and a lot of organic feed is actually imported. So it can be quite difficult to manage that. But going on to the opportunities, being a low input, low output system has allowed us to ride milk pricing cycles. So high margins has helped us get through those periods. Our soils have bounced back, and we've learnt how to handle them differently, putting different fertilizer, using a lot of compost on farm. And that's really my husband. Luckily, he's obsessed with soil. I'm stick to the numbers, but he's totally obsessed with soil. So he takes up that side of the business. And his big goal for the farm is to try and grow as much as a conventional farm without the inputs. So, I'm not saying we're there yet, but we are definitely seeing improvements. And that's using the cows, but also using outside the box thinking with composting and different ways of growing and what we're growing in the ground. Having the right cow for the system has been really important. It might not sound like a financial thing, but it really, really has been, because the right cow needs less input. And as we've come out the other side of our breeding, we've got a cow that's settled probably 8 years in. It's taken us that long to find that cow. We needed a cow that can walk far, but put milk in the tank and also respond to some feed if the milk price is good. So we needed sort of an all-rounder cow, and I think we're there now. It's not been easy, I won't say that at all, but you have to treat the farm like any other business. That's, I think, as farmers, sometimes we're not good at that, is that because we live there and some of it's a lifestyle, but it has to be treated as a business. And I think having a business partner for the first 10 years really kept us accountable and made sure that we made profit year in, even in the hard times. Profitability needs to be part of the sustainability conversation, and that's really, really important, because like you were saying, Andrew, we will need a business that can be for the next generation. We're not just doing it for this generation. It needs to be profitable, sustainable, so that the next generation can take it on.
Thank you, Sophie. That's great. And there you go. So Andrew, I'm now going to introduce Andrew Brewer. Andrew Brewer, the Brewer family farms in Ennisbarton in central Cornwall in the south of England. The family has a variety of enterprises, including a wind turbine, renting land out to a vegetable grower, and notably a fish and chip shop that I haven't tried yet, alongside their dairy herd. Andrew was the winner of the Farm Carbon Toolkit Carbon Farmer of the Year 2024 for his work in reducing his business greenhouse gas emissions.
We farm just over 1,000 acres in mid-Cornwall. We milk a bit around 500 cows, finish all the animals for beef. So we supply our milk to Arla, which is a Europe-wide farmer cooperative, so which means we own part of that business. Our milk personally goes through to the supermarkets as liquid milk. It's then made into Cornish clotted cream as well. I want to make my farm better for the next generation. It probably sums me up as a regenerative farmer. I want the next generation to have a better farm than I had. In the year 2000, I was asked to join a discussion group, and we went over to Ireland to see grass-based dairying. And that was my real light bulb moment. It's like, this is what we've got to do. We had to change and understand the natural farming system, a simpler grazing-based system. The key changes we made, we switched from an intensive, complicated dairying system, and we absolutely wholeheartedly adopted a spring block calving system, maximising grass, giving us short, sharp, intensive work periods, but then giving us a winter holiday. Grass is our cheapest feed. So if we can convert that into milk, it's got to be better for our bottom line. It's that principle of block calving and managing grass to the best ability that we can is absolute key to our business, as well as financial management. 25 years ago, we were milking 3 times a day, and we wanted to be in a strong cash position as a business. We've gone from 3 times a day and 9,000 litres a cow, down to milking once a day, doing 4,000 litres a cow. So yes, yields dropped, but we've now optimised and settled at about 6,500 litres per cow. We just dropped the cost to the extent that we were actually making more money, considerably more money. We've seen quite a big benefit to herd health. Since the early days, it took a lot of pressure off the cows, helped with body condition. On-farm trials that we've done here, we have actually proven that if we include sequestration from our hedgerows and carbon sequestration from our herbal lays, we can prove that we are sequestering more carbon into our land than we are emitting as a total business, meaning that we are net contributors to carbon reduction. So I would suggest anybody thinking of transitioning over to regenerative ways, start small. Start with one field to start with. Prove it to yourself first. Then you can prove it to others with confidence. And then that gives your banker or your consultants confidence in you.
And Andrew, your film is beautiful, but I do remember how hostile the weather was that day. It was pouring rain. I'm just going to go directly to the question because I'm aware of time and we do want questions from the audience. So what are the supply chain actors doing to address financial barriers to transition for dairy farmers? And additionally, how have you incorporated diversification opportunities on your farm?
Good morning, and thank you very much for the opportunity to be here today and take part in the films. Yeah, Cornwall has lovely weather. Regularly.
I've learned every weather in the UK.
So the actors within the industry, you know, the banks, many of the banks now are putting out green loans and are actually trying to help farmers with the right mindset. But understanding your carbon footprints is becoming very important for farmers to understand that, because it can actually help with lending rates. You know, there are a lot of milk buyers now, ours as Arla particularly, are working very much on a regen pilot schemes, or definitely, you know, and some other companies with regenerative milk as well. So it is the future. The public awareness is growing. And I think one of the weaknesses of regenerative is that we've not got a real definition of what it is, and it's different to every one of us sat here. But soil is the link. Getting that soil more productive gives us strength for the future. Diversification-wise, having a dairy system that's very profitable and resilient to changes in outside problems gives you time, and time is the big value. You can look for different opportunities. We put up the wind turbine, but it's we did a business course in Ireland, my wife and I probably went to be a raving capitalist and came back thinking actually a lot more to this. And we looked at, yes, we would like to have milked a lot more cows at the time, but actually we've looked at it as a second farmer or more cows it has to be a business decision. And then if I can get a better return from something else, we will. And also with the fish and chips, I've got 2 daughters, and my job is to help them grow for the next generation. And if we invest in their passion, they're going to be more successful. And if a lot of farmers need to invest where the passion lies for the next generation.
Thank you, Andrew. And now we're gonna introduce David Finley. David and Wilma Finley are running an organic pasture-fed cow-with-calf system in Dumfries and Galloway, becoming the first at a commercial scale in the UK and the largest in Europe.
Our farm is called Rainton Farm, and it is 850 acres, of which a lot is rough grazings and woodland. The agricultural industry was struggling a bit. Profitability in the mid-90s, we started looking at the alternative, which was organic farming. The first 5, 6, 7 years was a struggle, and I would not have kept farming organically had we not been selling our ice cream nationwide on the back of organic, because no one else was doing it. My most profitable years in dairy farming were once we cracked the organic thing, because our productivity had risen and our costs had shrunk. The breakdown of our milk sales are 80% cheese, 10-15% goes to liquid into the organic herd as a wholesale, and then there's about 7 or 8% go into ice cream. The brand of the cheese is the ethical dairy. We thought, okay, what if we leave the calves with their mothers? What would happen? And that was the beginning of our journey to ethical dairy. The big question was, if these calves over 5 months are drinking so much milk, how can this ever be a business? First thing is these calves, they're drinking a lot of milk, so they're growing more than twice as fast in those first 5 to 6 months, and allows us to increase our cow numbers. We can carry 25% more cows as we could before. Not only that, but the suckling action of the suckling of the calf is stimulating milk production. The cows are producing 25% more milk per cow. So we've got 25% more cows producing 25% more milk. Sure, the calf is drinking 35% of that milk, but we've actually got as much milk, if not slightly more milk, than we had before coming out of the system. It proves that it is possible to produce food and enhance the environment and build biodiversity, have animal welfare and be profitable, because we're getting the production levels that we were getting with all the fertilizers and pesticides, but without them. So we've saved all those costs. Rather than buying stuff to do that, we're harnessing these natural processes. Farmers need the hope, possibility that this could work, but what they do need more than that is a market. They need a market, because the market is not there. It's there in form, but it's not there in a form that is strong enough to drive transition, and that's what we need. People who are in need of good quality, well-produced food, they get the cheapest. That's a crime. There should be a market created for food that is delivering the outcomes that society needs to be sustainable, in my humble opinion.
So, David, and I know we can talk for hours and days, but I am aware of time, sorry mentioning it. But my question to you is, what are the biggest lessons you have learned on your journey, and what advice would you give someone who wanted to implement your practices?
Thanks, Maria. Good morning, everybody. What we've learned, we've been transitioning to organic, then to pasture-fed, and then to cow with calf. So we've done a lot of transitioning, and it's really all these transitions take time, and you need persistence, you need confidence that it's going to work at the end of the day. And as I said in the film there, we need a market that is almost like a guarantee, because you're investing a lot of money, and you've got to know that there's going to be a return at the end of it. For us, we could see with our visitor centre on the farm, we're getting 75,000 visitors a year. We could see the visitors were, particularly women of a certain age, were quite distressed by the fact that we were taking the calves away, so we could see there was potential market there. We are niche marketers, and that was what we went after. What I would say to anybody thinking of going through the transition is, go and see it working in practice. Give yourself confidence. Take your team, because they have to know that it's going to work. And if you can get your team behind you, you can take that forward. Whether it's a step at a time, or like us, we just jumped into the deep end. It is up to you. All the best.
Thank you, David. And our last film of the morning, and then we open the floor for some Q&As, is from James Robinson. James is the fifth generation at Strictly Farm in the northwest of England. James is also the English chair of the Nature Friendly Farming Network, and also won the Farming and Wildlife Advisory Group Silver Lapwing Award in 2022, which recognizes farmers who demonstrate real commitments to the conservation of species, habitat, historic aspects of farms, and natural resources. That was difficult, eh? So please, let's see the film.
The farm is 300 acres, and we have about 120, 130 milking cows, plus followers. So there's about 250 cows on farm altogether, and these are dairy shorthorns. So these are a native breed that have been pedigreed at our farm for over 100 years now. We focused on dairy, so we converted to organic 20 years ago. The government at the time had a scheme for a conversion grant, so like a 2-year conversion grant within a 5-year scheme. So without that conversion grant, we wouldn't have been able to manage those first 2 years, because we did get a yield drop, because your land is very much used to having that glug of artificial fertiliser on 2, 3, 4 times a year, whatever. So your grass yields are definitely down. Feed is more expensive, so there's a period when financially it's very hard. We worked out a way to get through all that. We've come out the other side now, producing more milk than we were 20 years ago. Animal health, that's way better than it was then. So we've reduced our antibiotic usage way down, with fewer inputs in terms of bought-in feed, but then of course 0 inputs of bought-in fertiliser, sprays, anything like that on the land. Because we're organic, we get a premium for our milk. We're on a contract with U-Tree Dairies, so that's where the bulk of our milk goes. 4 days a week go to them, then 3 days a week goes to a local artisan cheesemaker, and they approached us because of the way that we farmed. We're expecting weather extremes. By 2050, the temperatures that we're going to be looking at are going to be way more than we're getting at now. We're really lucky at Strictly that we've got so many old hedgerows. That benefits the cow in extremes of weather, the wind and rain, but then also the sun as well. We've had some really hot days this last week. We've also planted quite a lot of wood pasture this winter, 10, 12 acres of wood pasture gone in this winter. These trees are going to allow our cattle to graze in those fields and still be able to graze peacefully because of the shade and the shelter that there is within that. A lot of the stewardship schemes there is at the moment are actually making us more resilient. On a personal level, I don't know what I'd do without being able to come down here, because farming's a rubbish job quite often, but you can come down here and you can watch birds and butterflies, and you might see a kingfish diving at the beck. All the things that you can see and hear is only here because of the changes that we've made It's just a perfect way to spend a few hours down here. I think as farmers we're in a unique position really that we can make such a positive change to the land, the biodiversity, the water quality, the air, the communities that would come into this as well. The transition that we're in now, I don't see that as a threat to farming or farmers. 70% of the land is farmland in the UK. So, you know, it has to come through us. So we have got such an ability to make such a positive change. And I feel quite empowered, really, as a person, as a farmer, for that.
And you have a beautiful farm, of course, but I do want to really thank you, James, for bringing mental health awareness to our film, which is a very important point, and you've shared how that has, transitioning to regenerative agriculture has been instrumental when going through challenging moments. My question to you is, what might need to be in place to de-risk transition for the financial providers and for the farmers?
Well, firstly, May, thank you very much for including, and the rest of the team, WWF team, for including me in part of this, and to Claire and Colin for making such a fantastic film and making our farm look that good. And that flat as well. Everyone that knows it isn't flat either. And we did get some sunshine, which we usually get in Cumbria, so that was great. In terms of the need for the transition, the need for support for the transition, everyone has to believe that what we're aiming for is going to work as well. So we need confidence within the financial sector that the journey that the whole of the farming industry is on currently, and we have already started that, that we are moving to a more resilient place. So in 15, 20 years' time, those farmers that have begun the change or are about to begin the change or even thinking about just making that first step, they are going to be a much more resilient proposition for paying that money back at the end of the day. As we're farming now, it's not sustainable for the land, not sustainable for the biodiversity. It's not sustainable for us as farmers either. You know, you mentioned about the mental health aspects and stuff. Well, we as farmers, if we aren't able to cope with the changes within the geopolitical climate and the massive climate extremes that we are going to get, if we're not able to cope with them mentally, then however are we ever going to be able to farm as well? So we are part of this. We are very important as farmers, and we need that support right through from policy, from banks and everything to see us to the other side.
Thank you, James. And we are running a bit, so the session is supposed to end now, but if there are questions, we're going to take 2 questions from the audience, or I don't know if we have online questions. Go ahead. Introduce yourself, please, if you will. Go ahead.
I think farmers are best placed to be able to teach other farmers. Farmers will only listen to farmers, won't they? Whether that's looking over a hedge or it's going to a webinar, or sort of sitting somewhere like this or going for a farm walk. And I think if farmers were given the opportunity to share what they do, officially as well, you know, pay them for that advice, pay them for visiting other farms and giving advice or hosting farm walks and things, and just giving farmers the opportunity to share what they do, all the good and all the bad stuff, because there is, for everything that was on that film that's worked, there's a whole heap of stuff that hasn't worked. You know, probably 10 things haven't worked and 1 has. So we really need to share what we've done. And I think in terms of pound spend from government, that would be like money in the bank. It would be fantastic value.
Thank you. I think we need to leave the room, but so shall we just take one, or just give a round of applause to our panel? If there are still any journalists in the room and they want to approach us, there will be opportunities for further interviews for our farmers. And yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for coming.